Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Between Realms. That's the first time we've been able to say that.
Nice.
And I'm not talking just behind the camera. Olivia is with me as always, but she's behind the camera tonight.
Hello.
Maybe she'll come out later, I don't know. But back again with us tonight is Amy, and tonight we are going to do the history of the paranormal. That was something we hinted at a little bit last time you were here, and tonight we're going to go more in depth.
Gonna get all nerdy on you.
But before then, we do have a few things I just kind of want to keep everybody up to date on what's coming up and stuff in the future. We do this every week, so I don't expect you to keep track of it. But on the 2nd, we actually have we're having our meeting with the owner of the Braylock Inn to go over details for this October's event. So, as I said before, we're going to try to mix it up a little bit this year, change it up, make it different after, I think it's 6 years of doing it now. So we decided, let's try something a little different. So hopefully we'll have more details after the meeting, and then as it gets closer to August and the tickets go on sale, we can really get into more details and let out more stuff. But for now, we're not really 100% sure on how we're going to do it different, but we're working on it. May 3rd, we are hopefully going to be going to the Clyde investigation. Unfortunately, if you follow us on Facebook, you would have saw that we had to postpone it. We had some stuff come up that was beyond our control, and we're still working on getting that hopefully rescheduled. So we're hoping for the 3rd. And the 4th, we have the Paracon events hosted by the New York Paranormal. That's going to be in Rose, New York at the community center. So we'll be there all day from 11 to 7. And we will be presenting. I do not know what time, but as soon as I find out from those guys who are hosting it, putting it together, what time we will be hosting, or I should say we will be presenting, I'll let everybody know. So if you guys do want to stop out and come see us, it'll be great to come see us and check us out. Or if you just want to come and check out the event, $10 at the door. There's going to be all kinds of food trucks there. There's going to be vendors outside, and then you're going to be doing a lot of paranormal stuff on the inside. You're going to have psychics and mediums and all kinds of people there. So it should be a fun day, all in all. Other than that, live show is coming up. Next week, we got the Fulton City Library. Mike will be back for that. Immediately following week, we're going to be doing the Buffalo Naval Yard, which was another great place that we did. So I'm sure Mike will be here for that. May 14th, we'll have Tammy on the show as the raffle winner, or not raffle, contestant winner, I guess, with pick the name of the show. So she came up with the name Between Realms, so she's going to be here on the 14th asking us all kinds of questions. So if you want to come to that one, you're more than welcome. Or else it's just going to be Olivia and I. But she'll have a bunch of questions for us to answer and kind of just hang out and talk for a while. So that'll be fun. The week after that, we have the Wayne County Jail, which will actually be hosted that night by Olivia. Is going to be taking over the realms that night. She really wants to take that one. That was one of her favorite places that she went to, and I told her I want her to run that show. So we're excited for that night because I don't have to do anything except click buttons like she does. So I can't wait for that. The 2 weeks following after that, we have Fort William Henry 1 and 2. It's going to be a 2-night event because we have so much stuff in there. And on this second night, which would be June 4th, we will be joined by Rob Anthony, who's a former investigator, a friend of ours, who was there, who's actually watching us right now, and he's saying hello from Ohio, Defiance, Ohio.
Defiance, Ohio.
And fun fact, Rob, I'm glad you're watching, not to be way off topic. Defiance, Ohio, while you're there, you should check out the middle school because it was on Destination Fear, and I literally just watched it before I came here.
I love Josh Gates.
So check that out. Nope, that wasn't.
Oh, it was Destination Fear. Okay,
Yeah,
not
Destination
Josh
Fear.
Gates. What?
Yep. So they just did a whole episode on that. So you might want to check it out, Rob, while you're there. And other than that, the only other thing we got scheduled right now is June 21st for the Morrisville Library event. We are in talks. I don't want to say for what, but we are in talks with another prominent location in Morrisville. Literally tonight, they're meeting with the board to decide whether or not they can get approval for letting us come in, and hopefully we'll be doing an event for them too as well. So that's all in the works. We got a lot of stuff coming up.
Thank you,
really
Michelle.
Busy. So other than that, I will turn you over to Amy.
He's done. Look at that. He's gonna read questions. He didn't want me to take his job away.
And just for the record, Rob already said he looked into that. What makes you think I haven't looked? He looked into the school, don't
Oh, of course he did. Smart man. So I just want to kind of touch base or talk about I'm the big nerd of the group. I love history. I love all things information. So not just the investigation side, but the why we do what we do. Part of that is the history of this. So we're calling this haunted history. So basically, when it comes to something that's considered to be haunted, we kind of give the idea of what is it, a haunted location. They're generally associated with traumatic events, or something that's a traumatic or big emotion in a spirit's life or a person's life. That being said, in terms of the documentation of paranormal evidence, the first ever recorded paranormal experience was from around 1500 BC. So there was a tablet made in Babylon during this time. It's believed to be the first depiction of a ghost. So if you were to look at the picture, I showed it last time we did it. It's a stone slab, looks like someone being dragged into purgatory, so to speak. Then if you kind of move along a little bit further into history, there kind of hasn't been much that we found. First century AD, there was a Roman author and statesman named Pliny the Younger. He recorded one of the first notable ghost stories. Whether or not this is a true or false story, he reported the spirit of an old man with a long beard rattling chains. So that could kind of go back to that whole,
I don't know
when you think about,
wait a second.
they're distracting me.
Sorry. I just wanted.
It's Sean's fault. He could have just texted me.
Oh well, we're aware that this is backwards, so
Yeah.
Oh,
give me a minute.
we
Oh,
didn't switch.
I did just realize that.
it's backwards. Good to know. I didn't notice it, but then again.
You're not looking at it.
Yeah, I'm not all that smart.
I'm looking right at it.
I stared at it this whole time and nothing in my brain registered.
That's okay. Alright,
Well,
so...
it wouldn't be. Let's not fall off the rails this quick.
Alright, so moving
away.
on. So after the 1st century AD and the Roman author and statesman Pliny the Younger, then the next documentation that we can really hold down, it was in 856 AD. So it was a poltergeist, that activity that was reported in a farmhouse in Germany. This allegedly tormented the family by throwing stones and starting fires. So that's kind of the oldest history we have that I can really find when it comes to the documentation of the paranormal activity. Again, it's old stuff. So then you kind of got to move on a little bit and kind of going into the 19th century, so the 1800s. That's kind of where we start to get into this more spiritualist movement. It's not so much investigating the paranormal as it is contacting the paranormal. There was a thing called Society for Psychological Research and Investigating Spiritual Matters was created. But the really first large movement was the spiritualist movement of the 19th century. And it kind of moved into the early 20th century. Spiritualism was kind of the idea that the dead could communicate with the living. This was generally more or less done through seances, mediums, and spirit photography, not to the extent where we do EVPs and things like that, more using mediumship. So kind of moving on to that modern spiritualism movement, this actually started in upstate New York, well, actually Western New York if you want to get specific. It was 1848 in Hydesville, New York. There were two women that, if you know anything about the paranormal, you would know that the Fox sisters. So Maggie and Katie Fox, and he's giggling over here.
Because of her, I'm sorry. It's fixed, by the way.
Oh, good to know. Oh, I see it now.
Yes.
I'm over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, her hand gestures are. Sorry.
You know you could text him.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, so kind of moving on to that, Maggie and Kate, the Fox sisters. Anybody who knows anything about the paranormal, the Fox sisters are kind of the mothers, I guess, so to speak, of the spiritualist movement. So their thing was, they called it a spiritual telegraph. So they communicated with spirits through knocks and rappings. So they would ask a question, answers would be in knocks and rappings. So in about 1858, or 1888, they did admit to being a fraud. They were using cracking of their knuckles, like on joints, were attributed to the noise. So all the knocks and raps were all their body movements.
Kind of like the alleged Satori Halls.
Yes.
And I say alleged. No. I'm not saying she doesn't, but I know there's a big
thing
about
whether
that.
We're not there, we can't really judge there, but again, that's kind of where that was. But the kind of a fun fact about the spiritualist movement is female mediums use this movement to not only, it was to bring attention to the women's suffrage movement, which is a really big piece of that late 19th, early 20th century movement. So one of the reasons that the spiritualism really kind of kicked up, they believe, is due to the Civil War. So a lot of times back in the Civil War, when people died, you would have their bodies and you would set it up in your parlor or whatever, and that would be your wake or your funeral. And at this time with the Civil War, the bodies weren't coming home because obviously we didn't have refrigeration or anything to kind of keep them, so they were kind of buried as where they were in mass graves. So that closure that people had to kind of see and say goodbye to their loved ones kind of really wasn't there. So what would happen is there would kind of be like that lack of closure. So they were looking for ways to communicate with their dead loved ones, to kind of say goodbye, have that closure. But by the end of the war, 11 million people had subscribed to the spiritualist movement, and there were over 35,000 people identifying as mediums. Majority of these were probably not actual mediums, and a lot of them, like the Fox sisters, were probably fraud. Not saying that weren't real mediums, because there were, but you're talking about a huge number. Part of the spiritualist movement not only is communicating with the dead, also gave into kind of healing properties using things like, they called it the patient's magnetic fluid to heal them of their ailments. Kind of using their own chakra, so to speak, to kind of heal them. Again, a big part of that was that fraud piece of it, trying to kind of use a belief to heal people. And in some ways it may have, if you think about the placebo effect, but in terms of major illnesses, it probably didn't. Kind of the next big movement with the spiritualism was the spirit photography, and I know we touched on that a little bit earlier in an earlier meeting or live meeting.
The last show?
Whatever, the last show I did. Spirit photography was where they would take a picture. William Mumler was the most famous one. He claimed to be able to capture the spirit of your loved one through photography. And he did this in his studios in Boston and New York. His most famous photograph, which I had showed in the first show that I did, was Mary Todd Lincoln with what appears to be Abraham Lincoln behind him. This actually, kind of fun fact, was the last photograph taken of Mary Todd Lincoln. But there were a lot of photographers that were doing this. Long story short, it's double exposure, and when you have those old cameras, I don't know if you've ever watched the stuff, but they would have to stay still for a very long time, so it was very easy to do a double exposure on that because of how still they had to stay for extended period of time in order to get the image on the, whether it's the glass or the paper or the tin type. So that was kind of also a scam. So then, moving on to seances. So that was another big part of this movement. Again, we're going to go back to that hoaxes. There was a big rise in hoaxes because obviously there's no electric lights. They're done in dimly lit rooms where you can kind of have more sleight of hand. And there are grieving families that really, really wanted to believe this. They wanted to believe that they were communicating with their loved ones. And some may say, what was the harm in it if it gave them peace? That's kind of, you judge for yourself. But at the end of the day, there were a lot of hoaxes. I'm not saying every seance they did 100 years ago was a hoax, but there were a lot.
There were also at least one notably famous person who pretty much spent that.
The next person I'm going to discuss?
Yeah, I was going to say the
Harry Houdini.
Yeah, the end of his life. I don't know if it's the end of his life, but...
So Harry Houdini spent a good portion of, it could have been the end of his life. Someone's bringing a blanket in here and didn't offer me one.
I'm washing it.
She's doing
Oh.
laundry.
I'm cold.
Uh,
All right. So Harry Houdini, he was a big skeptic, and he was obviously the king of sleight of hand. So his goal was to expose the hoaxes, or what he called unscrupulous mediums. And part of that was going to the seances and trying to out them, but also a lot of it was trying to figure out how they were doing it by doing it himself, not as a hoax or making people pay, but kind of trying to figure out how it is they're doing this. And it is a lot easier to do when you don't have bright lights shining on you or video cameras. So then we kind of move into...
Well, I just wanted to the one thing that I found really not odd, but ironic, I guess, is the best way to put it, was that for Houdini, who was so...
He's a magician.
Yeah, well, that he was so, I don't want to say anti psychics, but he was always trying to basically prove that, I don't want to say, I'm not trying to give psychics
He was trying to pull the
fake ones out.
of
Yeah,
the
for somebody who dedicated the majority of his, towards the end of his life to it, granted, he died a little untimely, but I found it funny or odd that when he did die, like right before when he spoke with his wife, they made a deal that do a seance on Halloween night and I'll come through. And I think she did it for every Halloween until she died. And I don't know if he ever came through or not, but I just thought that was kind of funny that
cool.
he was trying to out him all the time, but then towards the end of his life, be like, hey.
Yeah, and I don't know that, and obviously this was 100 years ago, and it's very possible that he did believe in some and was only trying to get out the hoaxes, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to say there are no mediums. There are mediums. There are legit people who are given a gift to communicate with the dead. But the problem is because it's so, you're not able to quantify it, you're really trying that trust factor. So we'll kind of move on to that. So one of the, kind of moving on to the modern spiritualism and kind of going back to this upstate New York, there actually is a location in Georgetown, New York. They call the Spirit House. And this is one of the locations in this upstate New York area that was a center of the spiritualist movement. So Mr. Brown, I believe his name was, I think it's called Brown Hall. He built this house with no blueprint. He was led by the spirits as to how to build the house. Kind of similar to the idea of the Winchester house, where she couldn't stop building, because of the dead people who were killed by Winchester rifles. Kind of a similar thing, but more in the fact that he was opening up a place where they could have seances and the spiritualists could gather. But if you ever go to the house, it is a very beautiful home. It looks like a wedding cake. It is a private home, so I would like to just kind of put it out there that this is someone's private home, so I would not stand out there and take pictures. If you want to Google it, you'll find it. But, be respectful of the people who do live there. It is a historical location for many reasons, just because, A, the architecture of it, and B, the spiritualist movement. But just be respectful if you do choose to try to find it. It's not hard, a quick Google search, but be respectful of the homeowners. So moving on to kind of what we're looking into our current modern spiritualism, because this is still a thing these days. There still is a spiritualist church. But moving into the 20th century, so moving from the 1800s, now we're going into the early 1900s, specifically during World War I, we're going to see another surge of interest in that spiritualist movement. And again, very similar to the Civil War, and where bodies are not coming back from overseas, and now we want that closure. So same thing, they were seeking out spiritualists and mediums and seances to try to communicate with those they've lost during the war. Although currently spiritualist was not as mainstream as it was in the Victorian era, it's obviously still alive and well today. If you would like, I believe there is a place in upstate New York called Lilydale, and they do have visitors. They do a bunch of events there. So, I mean, if this is something you're interested in, kind of more information about, you can obviously reach out to Lilydale. They do have a website. It's a really kind of cool camp area. It's like a summer camp is the way I can explain it. And people have houses and camps, and they camp, and they do some. It looks like they do some pretty cool events there. So, kind of moving into that spiritualism in upstate New York. Again, the spiritualist movement was kind of founded, for the most part, a little bit in Texas, a little bit here, but Hydesville, New York is kind of known for the Fox sisters specifically. Then you've got Lilydale, which was founded about 140 years ago as a spiritualist community, kind of a place where that they could all gather as a community. Obviously, talking to the dead has been a huge part of Lilydale since the beginning. I do have a website. It's www.lilydaleassembly.org. So again, and then obviously there's Brown's House, or Brown's Hall is a spirit house in Georgetown. So then if you kind of move into what we're seeing now, so we're going into 60s, 70s, 80s, we really have the famous clairvoyant and the Warners, Ed and Lorraine Warren, huge, I guess we would consider them kind of the mother and father of what we do now. The spiritualist movement kind of opens the door to acceptance of clairvoyance and things like that, which then opens the door to what it is we do today. So Ed and Lorraine Warren are probably the most famous of our paranormal investigators historically. And they are known for some very, very famous hauntings, such as the Amityville house, the Annabelle doll, and some of the movies that are very loosely based, I can't stress that enough, on their investigations. Obviously, those are movies.
I do, just a side note,
Yeah.
because I do like Ed and Lorraine.
Well, who doesn't?
I own, I had to find them, but I bought all their books,
Yeah.
like their whole collection.
Mm-hmm.
And I do recommend reading them. If you do like reading books, whether it's, I know on Amazon you could probably get them for either dirt cheap paperback, or you could probably just download them and read them. But aside from the movies, because yes, the movies take a lot of liberties, the books are great because it's like so many of their investigations and stories that have never made it to the TV, never made it to the limelight. They did stuff for like West Point. They've done a lot of crazy stuff. And I think what kind of gets lost too, and I don't maybe people don't realize this, especially early on, like because they started roughly the 60s, 70s, somewhere.
60s, 70s, I think.
I don't want to say it was kind of still frowned upon a little bit. I mean, these guys took a lot of shots. You know what I mean? Like for them to, I kind of get a little irked when people say, "Oh, it's fake. They faked it. You know, they're frauds." Why would a fraud? Let's be honest. They didn't make a lot of money doing it.
No.
Why would they put up with that? You know what I mean? Why would they put up with the constant ridicule from certain people? And it wasn't everybody, but it was a lot. And then putting their kids through it, their family through it, if they weren't doing it for real. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to con somebody, you probably wouldn't put up with it for that long.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking however many years. I mean, and then I think Ed died in the late 90s, I think it was. So you're talking for 30 plus years they did it.
And then Lorraine didn't die until early.
She just died,
yeah.
I think within 5 or 6 years ago or something like that. And she was still kind of doing it. Obviously, it wasn't as active as he was at the time. But I just wanted to throw it out there that you know they went through a lot of shit. I mean, they to do it.
Yeah.
And again, without them, you wouldn't have these TV shows.
No.
You wouldn't have all this stuff.
That's kind of where we're at now. Is so now you kind of have that gap, from Ed and Lorraine's height to now, where we have these TV shows, obviously starting with Ghost Hunters, with Jay Hawes and Grant Wilson. That really started Ed and Lorraine opened the door for those kinds of programs. But now we're kind of getting into this. There was a real height in that early 2000s into 2010s, and I hate to say it, now we're getting into the point where it's excessive.
Oh, it's 100% excessive.
And it's all entertainment value.
Yeah, it went from these guys
who were seriously doing it.
Jason and Grant doing it, and if you listen to it, a while back, Jason started up a YouTube page.
Yeah, I watch his YouTube channel.
And I think he even said it more than once that when they first started, they didn't expect.
Yeah.
I mean, they were literally had like no equipment. They had like it wasn't something that like now, if you get a TV show, you're given thousands upon thousands of dollars
for
worth
all
of
this
equipment
cool
and stuff. I mean, these guys were literally coming in with pretty much nothing except just
A recorder,
personal experiences that they had.
A
And they
recorder, a
wanted to do it.
K2, they had to put a quarter in.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even in the last like 10 to 15 years,
Yeah.
how far it's come. As far as the equipment goes, by far it's amazing. But it's also so like overdone now.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's
very overdone.
I mean, come on. How many? Literally, you can turn on your TV, and I guarantee at any time of the day or night, and find at least 2 paranormal shows going on. At the same time.
Well, I'm so, like, you know,
or even more.
I find it hilarious that I've been doing this 15 years and I've never been possessed.
Yeah, I mean.
I don't know. Like, never. Not once.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
But at the end of the day, they did open the door for a lot of these television shows. I think we are getting excessive. And I think, like, at least for me, one of the biggest things with, like, Ghost Hunters and Jay and Grant was that there were shows where they didn't get any evidence. And that was a show. Like, they're like, hey, your house is not haunted. This is what we debunked. This is what we found. And I think that it's important to note that the majority of the locations that we go to probably aren't haunted. Unless we're going to notably haunted locations, which we do that. But like a lot of the homes, I'd have to say a good 95% of the homes, or people who feel that their homes are haunted, probably are not. It doesn't discount anybody's experiences, but it's really important to understand that we're going there to debunk or to find natural explanations, and then when we are left with something we can't explain, that becomes our paranormal.
I think I like too. Like, you know, I was a product of Ghost Hunters.
So was I.
I mean, when they first started,
Oh, yeah.
That was I watched it every week.
I was in the Taps family.
Yeah, it was on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah.
And yeah, long before I did this,
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that really got me was they would play stuff. If you remember the early episodes,
Right. Yep.
they'd get their little trailer and they would review evidence together and they would play it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, let's say they had like 10 things that Steve or how was the other guy's name?
No.
It was before Dave. There's
Before
the dude run guy.
Brian Hunwas.
So when Brian and Steve would present, you know, let's say 10 things, I would hear it and I'd be like, oh my god, that's cool.
Yeah.
This was 15, 20 years ago. But then Jay and Grant would be like, well, no, that's not. That's not nothing. That's this or that's this or that's that. And it's like, oh, so wait a minute. So you're not gonna say that's evidence to keep me as the audience intrigued.
Yeah.
You're willing to still sit there and say it's nothing.
Yeah.
You would think it'd be
the
other way around. But
And
it would be like, oh yeah, that's something. We want viewers. And they didn't want that. That wasn't. And honestly, I think that's why. Like Jay I just watched one of his videos the other night, and he was talking about how Ghost Hunters is not on TV right now because they're no longer affiliated with any network.
Right. Well, because
and
networks were pushing them the wrong way.
Yeah, and I think that speaks volumes if they're willing to not be signed to it. Because let's be honest, people are going to watch.
Right.
So networks want them on their network. But for them to keep their values and keep what they do and keep everything the same, they're willing to say, no, it's going to be on our terms and that's it.
And at
that
this
does
point,
speak volumes.
Jay is still working for Roto-Rooter. So if your toilet is plugged in Rhode Island, Warwick, Rhode Island, you just call Jack, don't unplug your toilet. I mean, and I know, like, I spent a weekend, we used to do a Taps family reunion, and that was when the Taps family, everybody, if anybody wants to know, like, so Taps family, I know Jay talked about it a little bit on a couple episodes ago, where groups, local groups, they would get so much, like, requests for evidence, or requests for investigations, because they're on the show. So they kind of had to help, they opened it up to groups, you have to kind of sign agreements and stuff like that, but they'd open it up to groups and they'd kind of send all of the stuff they couldn't get to that was in your location to you to call it, you know, a lot of people wouldn't want us to come because we weren't Jay or Grant, but so then once a year we would have a family reunion and we'd kind of converge on some haunted location. And they're so incredibly down to earth. Like, first of all, they don't like being recognized. But they're just very down to earth people. And like when I get a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning with Grant Wilson telling me that my daughter's dance recital is a cop out because he's drunk and singing, but it's just it was a really fun family oriented thing. So they really are as down to earth as people think they are. I was blessed to spend a weekend with them. So, but again, you kind of got to take everything with a grain of salt because for as many legit people are out there, there are just as many, if not more, hoaxes or fakes. And you kind of really got to do your due diligence because it's paranormal, because we're dealing in what we can't see or what we can't necessarily quantify. You really got to kind of trust the people that are doing it. For example, when people ask for money or they don't want you out of your home, kind of the things that people do that kind of put the hair up on the back of your neck, and always making sure that those who are coming to are pretty healthy skeptics.
And I guess, not to harp on the TV show.
No.
If you're going to have a show, can you present it in a way where, I guess, like for example, Destination Fear, because you mentioned that earlier.
Right.
I was watching that with my wife,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they're on YouTube now, because they're no longer on TV.
Yeah.
And I would get annoyed because they would be doing their investigation, and then something would happen, and they would run. Where it's like, why do you do that? I'm screaming at the TV. Stop. You're supposed to go towards it.
Yeah.
But then I remember, their whole show is not based on investigating.
Mm-hmm.
Their show is basically based on facing your fear.
Right.
So I get it. They're not investigating. They don't say they're investigating.
No.
But then you got other TV shows that are
Investigating.
very notable.
Yes. They who shall not be named.
Yeah, and I'll say it. Like Ghost Adventures. They're supposed to be investigating, but yet they spend a majority of their time yelling and running and screaming, and it's like, well, pick or choose. What are you trying to do here? I don't know, and it's just frustrating. I guess it really is, and sometimes we do get saddled with, you guys don't do like what they do on TV. And it's like, no,
it's not the same. It's
not.
very different. Kind of tying it back into the history of things is people can deny the paranormal all they want, but we as a society have been documenting the paranormal since what was the oldest that we know of was 800 some odd BC. So we're talking thousands upon thousands of years ago, and who knows what was before recorded history. Then now you're talking about verbal history. So we're looking at, here's this verbal history, what's things that are passed down from generation to generation. You talk about, even if you go as far as the Native Americans or the indigenous people who are talking about, their spirit guides and spirits, and these are things that are well before recorded history. And a lot of times when we think about history or recorded verbal history, that was their way of understanding their current environment. But at the end of the day, a vast majority of people in the world have had some sort of experience they can't explain, no matter regardless of what it is. And at the end of the day, this is not a new concept, paranormal investigation or communicating with spirits. I can even go as far as to say, the Bible, it talks in the Bible of communicating with spirits. If you want to go, the Torah, the Quran, all of those, religious texts also talk about communicating with spirits. So this isn't a new concept. This is an incredibly historical concept, and not only the history of the paranormal, but a lot of the things we do, the histories of locations. So we can talk about history of paranormal, but then you go into that history of the actual location and what was the trauma that happened there. You talk about Gettysburg and all the traumas that happened there. He's texting.
Because you told me to text, so I was texting. I'm doing what you told me to do. I'm sorry.
That's okay. But, so that's kind of, if there's any questions about, kind of the history of things, again.
You know what I don't want to get into too deep with it, but I find odd sometimes is that I've noticed, I don't want to say a lot, but there are a good amount of people that are willing to, and this isn't knocking anything, so I want to make sure we're clear on that are willing to, like, for example, go to church say a prayer, sit there. They can sit there by themselves and talk to what they believe.
Yep, to whatever their
You know,
higher power is for whatever their.
but they're the same people that would turn around and say, "There's no such thing as ghosts."
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
wait, what? It's like,
You know, and I don't. This part of the conversation will stop here because we don't. This is not something we get into. I'm a born again Christian. That's why I know ghosts aren't real. Like that to me, that is why I can know that this is a real thing. The paranormal is real. I can't denounce a god or I can't say there's a god or a higher power, angels or whatever. That is paranormal. That's above and beyond the normal. That's not something, you know. You can't say that there's
Welcome back to Song Quiz.
I could understand as atheists saying there's no ghosts or there's no spirits, but to me, like being a Christian and believing in God solidifies the fact that there are spirits and ghosts and there's something beyond this world that we don't
Well,
understand.
yeah, and you can even take it away from religion. Go
Right,
back to earlier we were talking about Native American stuff.
Mhm.
You know, you'll have scholars who spend their lives digging in the dirt.
Yep.
Who will find ancient writings on walls and all that stuff that depict. You know, they'll be like, oh, that's a god that they worshipped, or if you watch the History Channel, that's a UFO coming down. But they'll accept that. They'll say,
E.T.
but they won't sit there and say that spirits are real.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what?
But it's what UFOs are.
I
like-
don't know.
I'm just gonna. I think we should just end on this.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot us any questions. I am a super nerd. I love all things history.
Rob said you can hear a lot coming from behind the camera.
No, I'm sorry. I was playing Song Quiz on accident.
She is playing games back there.
I-
See what she's doing?
This is what happens when you don't put her in front of the camera.
It's not right.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll forgive her. But at the end of it, like I said, and we're gonna wrap it up with that. Unless there's any questions if anybody's watching. I don't know how boring I am. My hands move a lot. It's
Nobody's.
like I'm dancing.
No, nobody's really asked. Well, it was nobody thought.
Oh, nobody.
It was
It was
her.
her. I see how she is.
No, I just think that you can't stress on knowing where. You know, again, I don't want to say we're better than anybody else,
No,
but
nobody's
I
better
think
than
that
anybody.
I think it's important that we. I mean, collectively. I mean, I don't know. I can't really speak for Olivia because she hasn't been doing it as long as we have. But we have respect for what we do
Right.
because of the history and the lineage that came before it. I can't stand pop-up paranormal groups that are in it because, you know, I watch Ghost Adventures, or I watch, nothing against the shows and shit, but that's not why you should do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just, I do it because, yeah, Jason and Grant got me interested,
Right.
and their technique got me interested.
Right.
But it was reading the books of like Evan Rain and tracing it back and being like, oh, I mean, honest to God, if we could still investigate kind of like how they did, like with their technology, I mean, I can really imagine the stuff that they caught compared to our digital stuff.
Right, and in some of those cases, it would have been harder to fake things. You know, VHS tapes and actual cassette tapes, things like that. I think too, like I was a big, when I got interested with Jay and Grant in the Ghost Hunters TV show, I read their books too. There's a couple of books that Jay and Grant had written with things that they had done pre-show, and some of the evidence that they had collected pre-show, which was really pretty interesting. One I remember is an elemental.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then GHI was pretty cool when they went into Europe into the castles. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, just because the whole history.
Right, and that's the thing, is
You
there's
know,
so much
yeah.
history, and I think too, for me, it's like bringing history to life, and in knowing, I don't know, like that's kind of why I always say things like, when we're talking about when we investigate, is always really remembering to be respectful and kind, and if that was your brother or sister or somebody else who you're trying to communicate with, you would want to be treated respectfully in the same way. And in the same way, if we think there's a child spirit, we get on the ground with them. Or what was it? One of them, we had a alleged cat spirit, and I was going, "Here, kitty, kitty," because you really want to try to reach out as best you can. But at the end of the day, it's just a really cool, thing in the history of it all is even more fun. I like to do that.
Yeah, and I always tell people all the time that literally it is like stepping back in time.
Yeah.
Not so much the private homes, because a lot of those things obviously are different. Yeah. But when you do stuff like Fort William Henry, Fort Ontario, Gettysburg, this one that we're in talks with in Morrisville.
And there's Fort Ticonderoga.
Yeah, I mean, you take any of these buildings that had so much death.
And so many things
and a lot of it, like in Gettysburg, for example, I understand nobody goes to war, and any war, even today, and I believe 100% that I'm not going to die. It could happen.
Right.
And even back then, I don't think anybody really thought, especially day one of the battle, that, oh my God,
I'm going to die today.
500 or whatever thousand people are going to die in 3 days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you can't really fathom it.
No.
And then to be there, I mean, to be, you haven't been there, have you?
Where?
Gettysburg?
I'm going in July.
So,
I'm going to ride the battlefield.
That wasn't me.
That was me. Oops.
That was not me. So, but well, July is actually around the time of the anniversary.
Right.
Of the battle. I think it's the second, third, and fourth, or something like that, or.
Oh, I'm going. Man, I better book my horseback ride fast.
You'd have to check. I forgot the actual 3 days.
Yeah.
But I believe there are in July.
Yeah. Because I'm going the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
But when you are literally standing, because I'm sure you'll go, and hopefully double check, because they had Little Round Top closed for a year or two of renovations. Yeah. But when you're literally standing on Little Round Top, and if you know anything of the battle, obviously that was a huge point for the Union in South Lawn of it. And you literally can look down. I mean, there's a reason why they wanted that hill. And if you know anything about war, you want the high ground. And to be able to just literally pick off people as they come at you. And I couldn't imagine being Chamberlain, who had to go, and I'm sorry, not Chamberlain. He was
Some general.
Chamberlain was the guy that saved Culp's Hill. We're not talking about Culp's Hill. But when oh my God, I really want to say his name, but I'm drawing a huge blank.
Rob said it's July 1st through the 3rd.
All right, so I was close. I knew it was right around that time.
Yeah.
When he was given the order to tell his men to take that hill at any cost, if practical, and I always like to say if practical, because that's always been a big debate whether or not he really said that or not. But anyway, to look at your unit and say, you see those hills? You need to just run through this open field. And there's a reason why it was called the killing field. It's just, and every single one of them got pulverized. I mean, it was just like, you're literally sending them to death. And to know that is literally stained in the ground, it's just crazy. It's going there is you can actually feel the sadness when you're standing.
Yeah, and I think that no matter, there's people who are empathetic, or I think that it doesn't really matter sometimes when you go someplace that's it's so steeped in history, it's just like you're overwhelmed with whatever emotion, no matter what, like to understand the amount of death and destruction. If you go to an asylum, the torture that those poor people went through because they were as awful as totally incapacitated to as it could be just a woman who was a little vocal. Man, I would have been in an asylum in a hot mess.
Well, if you were unwed mother?
Yeah, unwed mother. Like,
there was a lot of things you could get.
If your husband just wanted to get rid of you, you were too mouthy. Man, my husband would have gotten rid of me a long time ago. I'd be chained to a wall right now.
You could take her with you.
Her? but it's like
it was, and then you got to remember those I don't want to say handful. let's say out of 100 people, half of them might be nothing wrong with them.
Right.
That today we would just be like, here's a pill, or here you go. But then you got the other half who are legit crazy.
Yeah, psychotic or whatever.
We're gonna house you together.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what? So you're taking a poor woman who maybe got pregnant before she got married.
Or maybe she was raped. Who knows?
Yeah, and that's bad enough.
Because it's her fault that she was raped back then.
Then you're gonna put her in an asylum, which is again bad. And now you're gonna put a crazy person. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but again, it was a different time.
It was.
And I understand that.
I think it's the lack of knowledge, and I think that's I think as a society, even with this paranormal, I think our fear, the people's fear, is in the lack of knowledge, and what we're trying to do is increase that knowledge of what as much as we can, because obviously we can't see it. So we want to increase that knowledge so it becomes less and less terrifying or less and less scary. Or so that people can live in their homes and know that nothing's going to hurt you, nothing's going to harm you. Just tell them to stop shutting the cupboards in the middle of the night. Tell them to do it while you're not, whatever it might be, but really giving people the empowerment to take control and not be afraid. And I think that that's a big part of what we do. And I think that's a big part of the history part of it. It was mental closure, people losing their family members in traumatic ways in the Civil War and World War II, that they're never going to, this person, they say goodbye, you don't know if they're coming home. And then they don't, and you have nothing you don't have a burial, you don't have a headstone, you have nothing. You just have a letter that says they're not coming home, if you're even that lucky. It could be a letter saying, we don't know where they went.
Well, I mean, could you imagine being like the great-great-granddaughter or great, however many greats, of somebody who died at Gettysburg, and then if you want to go pay your respects,
you can.
You go there. Like, that's what you do. You just go to the field and.
Like, I have an ancestor who was in the Revolutionary War, and he lived to be 102 years old, and I have gone to his gravesite. The man was 102 years old, and he came home, but like I had that blessing, and even more were killed in the Civil War. And just not having that piece of closure or nowhere to go, and that's really kind of where that spiritualist movement really flourished in the during and after the Civil War, is really giving people that closure.
This might have nothing to do with history, but I think the big thing in my opinion, about history is you learn from it, whether it's Gettysburg or whatever,
the asylums,
but I think, let's be honest, how many people died we'll just say Gettysburg, but over the course of the Civil War, not from the battle, but from their injuries,
their injuries or illness, sickness, scurvy.
That really, in my opinion, probably helped out the medical field. Like how can we make this better?
How can we make it more humane?
But as far as for us, I never, and me personally, and I'm sure you're the same way, and I'm sure I know Mike is, we never tell people we know 100%. This is how you do it. And this is what we come up with, and this is how you investigate. And it kind of bugs me a little bit sometimes when I see groups, especially when they're just pop-up groups out of nowhere, that are teaching investigating. It's like, well, you can't teach, because we are always learning. So for you to come up and say, this is the way you do it, I don't think you could do that. I think that's why I've always been against. I mean, we've had people ask us before, why don't you teach a class?
Well, you can have a rule of thumb, but at the end of the day, it's a constant process of learning and a constant process of changing technologies, and it's never from 856 BC to today. It's
go from doing stone carvings on the walls
carvings to EVPs. Like, we don't. It's just ever changing, and you always, and I think that's just in life, we just always have to be in a constant state of learning. But that's why when I speak, when I talk about the equipment, I'll say, okay, EVP. In theory, this is what's happening, because all I can tell you is there's this thing that's on a recorder that we didn't hear at the time that clearly says fireman, or whatever it might be. It clearly says that, and it wasn't there, and we didn't acknowledge it, and I don't know how it's there. But it's there. And that's kind of where you get paranormal. Is it a ghost? I don't know. Is it not a ghost? I don't know. All I know is this is here. We didn't hear it at the time, and it's on the recorder.
So I think it's one of those questions that we'll never be able to answer. No. I mean, really? I mean, it's like not that I mean, yes, we call it an EVP,
right?
Because
it's a phenomenon.
Is it electronic? Yes. Does it sound like a voice? Yes.
And it's
is it?
definitely a phenomenon.
So yes, that is it. But to be able to flat out say, you know, this is 100% this or
100% that.
The only way we're gonna know that is
if it comes out and says, "Hey, my name is Joe Schmo," you know, like, yeah.
I mean, or if it's our time to go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the age-old question: what happens when you die? I don't know. I can tell you, I believe that this isn't it.
Right.
I can tell you that.
No, and I agree with that. Obviously.
Just because of everything that we personally have experienced. I've seen things. I've experienced things that the only way to explain it is something else.
And you go to the question: is it people in purgatory? Is it people in between who don't know where to go, or is it another realm?
It depends on what religion.
You don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, but really, could it just be another realm? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can just tell you what I've experienced and what I know.
I will tell you the same. You were a few weeks ago. Oh God, it was more than a few weeks ago. A few months ago. You were on your cruise.
A couple months ago. Fun. I was on the live on my cruise.
When you were on your cruise and we did that live show with our friend Terry from the Texas Paranormal team.
Yes.
And we had a show. I threw him the curveball.
Uh-huh.
And he loved it because he couldn't answer me.
Yeah.
But I always joke around and I say, you know, how do we know what we're doing is actually investigating? Mm-hmm. So for example, if I say, can you knock? Mm-hmm. And we hear a knock. And we can knock 3 times and you hear it 3 times. Mm-hmm. How do we not know that when you die, you don't go to heaven, you don't go to hell, you don't go anywhere, but you do go to, we'll call it, another dimension.
Yeah, dimension. Mm-hmm.
And how do we not know? I always thought it was funny that how would you like it if in another dimension you're sitting in your living room and you randomly hear somebody in your kitchen saying, "Can you knock on something?" So now you get mad and you
shut up, people.
You know, and then to them they're hearing, but yet what you think you're hearing are ghosts.
Right. And they're thinking.
Well, what they're hearing is ghosts. You know what I'm saying? But we're just in a totally different dimension.
Who knows?
But, I don't know.
Rob said over 618,000 people died in the Civil War, including the one woman, the first civilian.
Jenny Wade. And her grave is still lit 24/7. Mm-hmm. I've been there.
Yep.
So yes, all in all, the history of it, I guess, is what. As me personally, history is a big reason why I do this.
Yeah.
I literally just had this conversation with hopefully a new client from Morrisville a couple nights ago, and I tell her, and I say the same. If you've ever been to any of our talks and discussions, I always say it too. Being able to be a part of history and relive it, and being able to go places that normal people can't go. So like when we do the Buffalo Naval Yard, and we'll talk about that when we do the show.
Running around in the middle of the night.
Yeah, we get to.
Yeah.
We get to go into places that the normal public doesn't get to go. You know, and we get to experience that.
Running around Revolutionary War Forts in the middle.
Yeah, and it does. It really does take you back. And in all honesty, like the best way to feel it is if you ever. I don't know the dates of it, but keep in mind every year around October. Our friends over at CNY Ghost Hunters do their annual ghost walk in Fort Ontario. And what I think is the coolest part about that is because there's such a risk of fire because of the buildings, you're not allowed to bring any open flames into the building. So when they walk the tour groups around, they'll have a tour group person in the front with an actual old school lantern with a candle. Mm-hmm. So it is really cool when you're standing in the middle of that fort and it's dark out and all you see are these lanterns kind of walking around.
I mean, people didn't look at me weird. I dress like a Victorian era.
It definitely does. It takes you back.
Man, I have a corset on right now. I have a big dress and a lobster claw tail.
I want one of those bikes.
The big wheel bikes? Yeah.
Just fall
I bought a Victrola Brunswick Panatrope record player for $20.
Just so I can follow.
I'm such a nerd. Alright.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, like I said, we got a lot of stuff coming up.
Yep.
I'm not going to go through it all again, but pretty much every Tuesday night for now, for the foreseeable future, we have shows.
Mhm.
Constantly updating our Facebook page, so please check that if you're looking for a certain show. If there's a place that you want to know if we did go to and maybe we have, and we just haven't done a show yet, feel free to reach out.
Or
Let us
you
know.
have any contact with anybody that?
As always, we're always booking
Always,
investigations. We are literally already booking some stuff out in October. So not to say we can't do something before that, but I'm just giving you guys that we will book out that far.
Mhm.
So if you do know of places, always reach out and let us know. Rob, thank you again for being a loyal viewer, and we'll see you on the 4th.
Yeah,
right?
thanks too, Mike.
June
I
4th?
know you're watching.
He'll be here. I can't wait for that. And it'll be another good night. So we have a lot of stuff. Hopefully we'll see you guys May 4th. And any more details we get from Braylock, we'll let you know.
All right.
Thank you very much.
We'll be in signing
Thanks.
off.
Have a good night.